position you well for a job aside product school? So I mean, this is almost like a direct question, but I mean it's still a good
Yeah.
way to start the year, right? So yeah, let me just place it here. Yeah, Roja. So you have the floor.
Yeah, I don't unfortunately have a very good answer for you. I think the best one is probably Reforge, is the one that I would respect the most. They have they've recently launched a product-led growth thing. They've got a number of, it's generally more growth focused, but if you're looking for if you have the budget, if the company has budget to spend on a course, the Reforge course is about as good as you're going to get. If it's not that, there's a bunch of other pretty good ones out there. I don't really follow much on the. I don't have any accreditation, product accreditation, so I'm not really best produced to say that. I mean, maybe throw this back out to the group. Has anyone done a great course that you'd highly recommend? Feel free to throw it in the chat or unmute yourself now.
I think the idea of a great course is very subjective. Really, I've done courses with Utiva, I've done courses with product dev, I've done courses on product school, like free courses on product school, and it's really when I'm actually taking on different projects, I'm like, oh, okay, I picked up this word from Utiva, I picked up this word from product dev. So I think is really what's the person looking out for in terms of like expectations. Then you can now be able to advise. Sorry, I think I should show this one, but you can be able to advise which course to take. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And pretty solid advice. Product is one of those things that there's so much to it. It's so broad. There's so many different ways of slicing it that doing a course that helps you solve or overcome a problem or a challenge or a situation that you're finding yourself in at work, like finding the skills to solve that and that you can learn them and apply them immediately is always going to be better than some theoretical course that you do but never actually get to apply. So I would say the best course is what you can actually apply to deeply understand the topics. I think there's two parts of product and getting good at product. The first one is sort of knowing the language and the terms and the methodologies and how they'll click together. And the second is knowing when to actually apply them. And the second part you only gain by doing and by implementing. So courses are great for the first part, but they're not going to give you true product sense. They're not going to give you real life situations of actually, I tried this framework and it completely failed. Here's why. And in the future situation, I would rather use this framework, or I would use this one with these changes. Like that's where the applied knowledge is what actually counts, because there's so many, every scenario will be different. So doing the course that helps you learn, if you're struggling to get your head around product-led growth, or get around like how to write technical specs, or a technical PM, or the analytics side of things, or product growth, like there's like working with loops, and what does that mean, and how do you kind of tie that in? Like what are metrics that matter, or any of those aspects. Or customer research, you can do a course on that specializes at that, that's going to help you apply it directly. I don't think there's a single gold standard of courses of accreditation. It's not like an engineering degree or a doctor or an accountant. You can't really just get an accreditation and then be able to do it. There's a certain amount of applied knowledge that has to come through it as well. So there's less emphasis on the course and more on the actual experience in the company you work for and the situations you had to work your way through. Does anyone disagree? Feel free to chime in, or I also don't have all the answers. So
Simi said spot on.
I'll take it.
I really want to hope the person that asked the question initially like is on this call, and I do hope that the person has like at least gotten an insight on how to go about it. So I mean, hi everyone, once again.
I think she's on the call, so she confirm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can confirm if you have
Okay.
questions. Yes,
Okay.
I'm on the call. So yeah, I do agree with what Roger and Simi said, right? All these courses, you just get this knowledge here and there and all of that. Okay, maybe what I was trying to say is like more like a certification. For example, we have this PMP project management certification that we all know it's quite recognized across the globe, right? So, okay, maybe I could now rephrase my question. Okay, would you advise a product manager to take like a PMP certification? Not like it's been a core, but it is something that can help your career, you know, having that type of certification, or are there maybe specific product management certification? Maybe that was what I meant.
Yeah, so I think getting a degree, it's it doesn't hurt, but it's not necessarily the best or most applicable thing. It depends on what you're looking for. Are you wanting to build out a CV that international companies will recognize? Will recognize. You're not going to recognize any of your one of your companies that you've worked for, or what you're doing, or any of your work experience. So they want to know that, oh, you've done certain accreditations that they can relate to. Then yes, get an international accreditation. But know that you're doing that for what the accreditation says about your experience and your thinking, not what your knowledge of product is. Like very
Yes,
rarely are you going to do a thing.
that's
So
what I mean.
yeah, so in that sense, yes, doing an international course to help you stand out in an international job in CV screenings, yes, that there is a world in which that can help. Some companies will look favorably on that. Some, it might not make a difference, and they're going to be more focused on your experience or how you answer the questions or how you screen, or whether you actually have a visa, or if they have to sponsor you a visa. That could be like a huge factor, way more important than whether you want a PhD course or
Exactly.
not. So I think it's going to depend on the answer is most of the time. It depends. Looking at what you're trying to do it for, it can help in certain scenarios, but I wouldn't do that course hoping to learn the knowledge to make you a better product manager necessarily. That isn't always the right thing.
Yes. Can I still speak, or have I taken so much time
Go
already?
ahead.
Okay. So, what you gave is like a generalized kind of, which I also do agree with. It depends on what I'm really looking at. And in this case, I'm looking at, okay, there are companies that really do not they really do not care about your certification. They just want to know if you can do the job, your experience and all of that. But let's assume in a case whereby a company would be interested in knowing, like seeing your certifications, perhaps something they can relate to. So is there like anything around a certification around product management you would advise someone to take, or even anybody in the room knows, or something?
Yeah. To be honest, I'm not qualified to answer that. I am not one of those people or one of those companies, so I can't.
Okay.
I can't speak. I can't speak for them. I would hypothesize that if it's a larger corporate company, like if you are trying to work for Microsoft or work for a slightly more corporate like IBM or a larger blue chip company, then yes, or an older school company. A lot of European companies are actually quite old school in their thinking and very traditional. So then getting an internationally recognized PMP or product level course or a Scrum or Agile course, that sort of thing is pretty widely recognized as that they'll know what that means when they look at it, and it'll mean something to them. But if you're wanting to work for a smaller company or a more cutting edge company that probably care a lot less about accreditation, like if you wanted to apply for Spotify, I don't think they're going to care about what courses you've done. They're going to care more about your experience and your thinking and how you approached it and your portfolio and those other aspects. So I think it depends on the type of company that you want to apply for, the type of product manager you want to be, and then the type of market that those companies will be in.
All right. Thank you so much. I think that explains it. Thank you.
Cool. That was hopeful. Make that useful. Anyone else? Princess, hello.
All right, I have a question. Last thing, can I go on, or is there any other question, or like for me?
Go, Princess. I give you the mic.
All right, thank you. So, Rhoda, first of all, thank you. Good evening, happy New Year. How do you, would I say tackle now? How do you handle a situation where
you keep getting more tasks on your table, and more and more and more, and it looks like the upper management keeps bringing these things to you, and they come in a very diplomatic way that you are, I don't know how to put it, but it seems like you are required to do this task, but the way it's being communicated, it looks like, oh, if you want, but everybody knows that you have to do it. But the way it's communicated, like, oh, we just want you to help on this thing, but it just keeps getting more and more and more, and it's like, oh, there's something else. Hey, come and handle this. Come and handle this. What's the best approach to handling that kind of situation? Seeing that you're being stretched too thin, and you don't want to go the rash way or the will I say, I don't know how to explain it, but you want to be very careful. Yes, because it's your employment, and you're just trying to see how best you can approach it. Of course, speaking with the people who are bringing these items to your table, so mostly like C level.
So it's a similar scenario when you've got your plate full, and other executives keep coming to you and asking for features to add into your product, and you don't, and there's too much to do and not enough time or capacity or whatever. And so, my typical advice for that would be.
Let me add more context. So some of these things are not the same things, like they're different things. So you have to context switch when you're trying to move from a particular product to the next one. They're not the same. So it's just very challenging. Yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, totally. And the way I've handled that stress in the past is looking at. You need to make it transparent to the people that when they're bringing stuff in of where that sits in your hierarchy. So to unpack that a little bit deeper, what you need to do is you need to know like what is the level of importance in what you're doing, and ideally that you should be leaning on a company strategy or like what the company has decided are priorities for the weeks, or to your manager what they've decided is the immediate priority that you should be spending your time on, because a lot of the requests coming in are going to be on smaller stuff or less important tasks. And so the easiest way to have those conversations is say, this is what my current priorities are. This is where that task fits into those priorities. Do you agree or disagree with that? Should I prioritize it further? Is there a reason for that? Should I compromise on other stuff? And you kind of, by making that, the tension visible to them as to where, not to say, no, I can't do your task, but say, I'm working on this right now. Is what you're asking me to do more important or less important than that? And sort of make that compromise. And they're going to say, oh, no, wait, that thing you're working on is actually more important. So, okay, I'll add that to the back burner. I'll get to it when I can. Or I've got a bunch of these deadlines, all of these things that are more important. I'm going to get to that by next week, Wednesday. Is that okay for you? And often, like the lower priority tasks, you can actually push right down to much longer time frames, and then they'll be like, oh, it's fine, I'll just sort that out myself, or I'll give that to somebody else. And it's not you turning it down. Your role is to work on the most important thing as much of the time as possible. And so if people are giving you other tasks, you're not getting capacity to work on other things, you're context switching, you need to just draw a bit more boundaries around what is most important, and then try and like show those boundaries to other people and show them your compromise, saying, this is how I'm making the decision and where I'm putting it in the priorities. Do you agree with that? Like, let me know if it is more important, and I'm happy to reprioritize around that. But all of a sudden now, they needing to make the call to say, no, you have to work on my thing, not that thing. And then you can start going to your managers and, well, this guy keeps overloading this executive keeps telling me to work on this, or the manager, often it actually comes from the same person, or your manager just keeps offloading stuff that they can't get to onto your plate, expecting you to do it all. And by pushing back, say, I'm working on these things, but they seem less important than this other big task that I really need to get out by this deadline. Are you okay if I work on that task and push these other items to the back of my to-do list or further down on my to-do list? So by showing that compromise, often people will realize when they're sending you meaningless tasks, and normally those tasks end up actually dropping. If you kick them out far enough, they normally just drop off the list completely. If it's a matter of this is all important and there's fires and it's like crises, that's when you need to actually go to your manager and say, look, I don't actually have capacity to get to all the stuff that's been thrown to me. can we bring somebody else on to help me tackle this stuff, or can we triage these tasks more effectively, that everything for that project goes to this person and everything from this project comes to me, and so that you're context switching a lot less, so you can actually process things easier. But really what it is around creating a prioritization framework, and then making that framework like clear to the people that are giving you tasks, or to your direct manager, and then helping them manage around that prioritization framework of what's actually most important. It's not an exact science, and in reality, it's always messier than in theory. It's easy for me to answer the questions, but I get that. Like in practice, that's hard. But often, just by pushing back a little bit, or by making them make that decision, it becomes clearer for them that you are working on something more important. And in the past, that has helped alleviate some of the pressure. It doesn't kill all of it, but it definitely helps readjust that relationship with those people that are just sending you stuff. Would that be useful in your situation?
Yes, I think the second part would be useful, because I was just waiting for you to mention the second part, where it seems like every single thing is important. So, like you said, talking to my aunt, it is not obvious that we expand this team because somebody is about to faint. So that, I think that's the best way we can appreciate very much for the answer. I'm actually very relieved that someone else can actually see and then answer that. So it's on the second one, and the second part of the question really answered it. So I think exactly getting one more person who would handle some of the tasks would actually be very good. Thank you.
Yeah. Another approach is to time box your diary. To say, for these 2 hours in the morning or these 3 hours, I only work on this project. And as other tasks come in, you can say, I'll get to that this afternoon. And so you immediately just block things out. So you're not reducing the amount of the volume of tasks coming in, but you're reducing the context switching. And often if you're working on similar tasks, and so in the mornings you work on this project or on these type of tasks, in the afternoon you work on these type of tasks, or Mondays and Wednesdays you work on this task, Tuesdays and Thursdays you work on those tasks. So splitting out your diary and prioritizing and managing people's expectations around that can also be a way of you adjusting it. But the problem is that doesn't actually stop the tasks coming in, and you need to address it at that level as well.
All right, thank you. I think I'll start with this, your last advice, because even if they want to hire, it will take a month to. So I'll just do the second one. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. I'm done. I'm done.
While we're moving on to the next question, everybody throw into the chat if you are being overloaded by too many tasks and not enough time, just to make Princess realize that she's totally not alone and this is 100% normal. Just go, yep, it's me in the chat, if that's you. Simi, I see your question there. Maybe I should just pick it up. Is it possible? It is possible some companies are very traditional on certification. I've noticed some ask candidates to at least have a PSPO certificate. However, more companies are concerned on hiring a candidate that can do the work and certified person. Yeah. Old school companies and like big banks and big corporates and most European companies I end up engaging with are very traditional and old school in their thinking, and they like having certification, and they like hiring white males and being very traditional in their mindsets and their approaches, which is generally good companies to avoid. But yeah, so just to wrap up that on Simi, but absolutely right. If there is a PSPO, I've never heard of that before, but might make a lot of sense. Cool. So has nobody else overloaded with too much tasks and not enough time? No one on this call out of 22 product managers. Heck, I've got some tasks for you.
I think they're shy because
okay.
80% of people that are actually working in small startups actually very overloaded, but they don't stop. Maybe you think they're going to report them to their guys. So sorry, no.
No worries.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I feel you, Princess. I've got the same problem. I had a huge. I gave a big lecture to one of our startups on Friday last week around how the importance of focus and how it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, that you keep working on 1,000 little things, but they're all just eating up time. And they wanted to set up half-an-hour meetings every day. And I was like, but that's 2.5 hours a week that you're not working on the most important thing. And eventually it clicked for them that actually he needs to just stop doing all that other irrelevant crap and just focus on the thing that actually moves the needle for their business. Cool. Any other questions, thoughts? Anyone? Michael, sorry, I was actually my Firefox crashed just as you were giving your unpack of your day. So I actually missed what you were saying, but I don't know if you want to unpack, if you want to ask, lead that into a question of what you're struggling with and see if I can help.
Yeah,
Okay.
so good evening,
Okay.
Roger.
Yeah, please go ahead, Michael.
So currently the issue is there is this integration we are trying to do, and we've been going back and forth for over a week trying to fix it. So the thing just keeps throwing up errors. So today what happens is once we create a customer account, it's a financial, we're working on financials. We create a customer account and then from nowhere the account is funded. And I've been on this thing for more than 4 weeks now. To me, I don't feel comfortable, and I can imagine how the project sponsor is feeling. And I don't really, to be honest, I don't know, because I'm supposed to, give weekly updates. I don't even know how to present it to the sponsor that I've been on a particular feature for more than 4 weeks. And this, we ought to have rounded this up 2 weeks ago. So I don't know how to navigate that. How do I present it so that it's not seen as though we are just not doing anything or we're not doing enough.
Yeah, so the reason any software project takes longer than it's supposed to is because the original plan didn't give enough space, or there was unknown. So there was uncertainty baked into the project that wasn't catered for. And so when there is scope creep, or when something goes wrong or doesn't go expected to plan, you're like, why are we late? And the deadline's now being moved by another 2 weeks. The most honest way of dealing with it, and different companies deal with honesty differently, which is a different topic, I won't go there now, but is to unpack, like, this is what we assumed would be the case. We assumed this API would be stable and that when we funded it, it would do this. Over the last 2 weeks, we have found that assumption to be false. Here are the instances of why that has been false. These are the things that we are doing to try and mitigate against that, but we still do not feel that we have the certainty we need to move forward, and that we are not at the level of comfort with this API that we were hoping to be with 4 weeks ago. That's why this is taking longer. Is it worth risking the business on this uncertainty? Because all business decisions are based around uncertainty. It's a risk-reward type thing. How if you want to be really risk averse, you just move really slowly and you scope everything incredibly detailed and then ship it really slowly and hope the market doesn't move faster than you. But there's normally a certain level of risk, like how critical, if it's like a funding or wallets and like financial infrastructure API, that's not the kind of thing you want to mess around with. If there's any kind of uncertainty there, you need to stop and identify that uncertainty, try and ring fence that uncertainty, and build in guardrails and protections and checks and unit tests and do what you need to do to be able to, it sounds like what the developers need to do is be able to reliably spin up a string of unit tests that can hit the API, create an account, fund the wallet, empty, and like make a payment out of the wallet, or do 1 or 2 actions like that, and run that every single day. And every day that it fails or an anomaly gets detected, like, you need 7 days of that running reliably before you can approve the integration. And so if that's the kind of layers of controls you need to build in to build the uncertainty, it's all about, like, this is what we thought, this is what we realized, what we learned, or what we didn't know, is that we thought this would be reliable. It's not reliable. Here's the evidence of why it's not reliable. This is what we're doing in order to try and protect ourselves from its unreliability. And these are the impacts it's going to have on the project. So that's typically by making that uncertainty or the false assumptions evident, you can start building a realistic plan around that. Does that sound like a feasible approach with your company and with the culture and with the thing? That's a very idealistic approach.
It is. Thank you so much. I think I'll just go back and I'll run with it. But then I'm sure, knowing who I'm going back to, he may not actually just buy it, but And at the end of the day, it's important that we get this correct. If we don't, it will still come back to haunt us later. So I'm not even ready to compromise on it. So thank you.
And it's really important that you come back with data. You say, this is what we thought. These are the incidences that we had. We created this account, it then got funded. That's not acceptable. We then tried another test. This is what we did. We had this anomaly. And when you start documenting those anomalies, it's like they can disagree that your assumption was correct or incorrect, but they can't disagree with the data. They can't disagree with your experience. They can't disagree with the logs. So that's what you need to push back on. It's not like your word versus his word, or like, oh, we thought this and now we're thinking that. It's, this was our assumption that this was reliable. This is the evidence that happened that shows us it is not reliable. Therefore, we need to make sure we can trust it, and when we need to make sure that it's reliable before we can proceed with this project. And so it's a data conversation. It's acknowledging a missed assumption and unpacking the data around why that is a missed assumption. It's not an opinion thing. Otherwise, people get very offended.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rejan. I think there's a question from Precious Etokana, if I'm correct, on the chat. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I have two questions. How do you manage a team that has late deliveries, especially when it falls back on you? And I had a hard time integrating in a space of relating with a team for the first time and working on a project for the first time. How do you work through that? Okay, two separate questions. Let me pick the first one first. So how do you manage a team that has late deliveries, especially when it falls back on you? So this comes down to, so similar to the advice I've just given Michael around unknown unknowns. Normally when things are late, it's because there are unknown unknowns and there are facts that have emerged that are true that you didn't think would be the case. Having said that, and as I gave the caveat with Michael, it depends massively on the culture and the expectations and the things setting up. If there is a really strong expectation that you have to deliver and your neck is on the line, putting in a bit more fat into your estimates, into your timelines, having clear checkpoints to say, are we going to hit this deadline or not, is really critical to give yourself the buffer if you're in a high pressure environment or one that has very little leeway for failure or for missing deadlines. You need to set internal deadlines that are much more stricter than that and actually run them and test them effectively. It also comes down to managing expectations. So any deadline is really just a man-made date that we guess and we put a stake in the ground and say, this is when we think it's going to be. Now, as we learn more things, the worst thing we can do is get to that date and get to the deadline and say, oh, we've missed the deadline. Like, that's completely unhelpful. It's completely unhelpful for management. It's completely unhelpful for team members. It's pretty demoralizing. But if, as you're moving through that, you can see, I don't think we're going to get to this time, we're not going to meet that deadline, and you renegotiate a further deadline or some other, you kind of manage expectations that there's going to be a shift. Like that you need to do as early as possible in the project. The earlier you do that, the less blowback there's going to be. That's not always possible, and sometimes your team is deceiving you, and it's hard to say. So I get that the short answer is it's going to depend on your scenario. I don't know if you want to come on off mute and give me a bit more nuance into what's going on. But typically, if you keep missing deadlines, you need to be more strict with the team. You need to micromanage their timelines and stuff a lot better, and you need to manage expectations with stakeholders more effectively and much earlier. You should never go through a deadline and be way off. Like come up to a deadline and be way off. If you haven't renegotiated that deadline before then you haven't been close enough to the project and to the delivery of the project and knowing whether it's actually on track or not. And there's going to be occasions when you'll miss deadlines, or you might miss it by a day or two, or there's stuff that will happen, or maybe there's something completely left field that you didn't take into account that will miss it. But if on a regular basis you're missing deliverables and missing deadlines, that is 100% on you for not being close enough to the project, not being clear enough about what the steps are that are coming forward, and then not managing expectations with stakeholders to renegotiate those deadlines or the impact of those deadlines when ahead of the time. And so, and if you are finding yourself in that situation a lot more, then you probably need to chat to your manager to get better support or get more help or people to guide you through that, or some better support, because otherwise you're just going to keep failing, and that's not going to help anybody. So if that's the scenario, like depending on which one of those scenarios is true for you, that's kind of how I'd respond. The one quick tangent. There's this famous triangle: good, cheap, and fast. Pick two. And whenever you talk about software development, you can build it good and cheap, but then it's not fast, or you can build it cheap and fast, but then it's not good. But the way that you break that sort of golden triangle is by just making the triangle really, really small. So, but as you narrow scope, it's much easier to ship good software cheap and fast, because there's a lot less unknowns baked into it. So if you find that you're missing really long deadlines and you're missing them out by quite large portions and there's a lot of uncertainty in it, often by breaking that up into multiple smaller deadlines, you can get a much better feel of how the project's going. How do you ship the scope down to ship these 3 or 4 pages, or this core functionality first? Then we can add this functionality, then we can add that, but let's get this working end to end first, because that's the most important bit. And if that ends up taking the full 6 months that we have for the whole project, that's the most important bit that we have to get right, and then that's what we focus on. So by adjusting scope, by cutting out the nice to haves in the scope and focusing ship and deliver end to end the must haves first, or one must have, and then add another must have. That helps you break down smaller milestones that'll often help you manage the expectations and manage the deliverables and manage your delivery dates more effectively. Josephine, do you have a question building on this, or is it a new question?
Yes, hi Roger, hi. My question actually relates to what you just answered as regards the deadlines and things like that being dependent on you. And what I wanted to ask on top of that is how to foster better communication within a team, especially with the software developers. I think that's a little bit of problem I'm having, the communication issue, and how to manage developers is basically my biggest problem now. I try as much as I can to facilitate communication with them. You know, I take into account what the time estimates they need for the project, but it just seems to be something lacking. I think, I don't know if you have any tips on how to manage developers. That's basically my question.
Yeah, how long have you got? That could be an entire talk just on its own. Yeah, I don't think we have time to go too deep into that topic, because that is a long and very nuanced topic. The short answer is to try and build trust with them, and the more they know, the more they feel that you're on their side, the more they're going to collaborate with you to help you make their lives easier, if that makes sense. So the more you are clear around that you're not there to chase them, you're there to give them, support them in what they need, help them deliver. Like what all software engineers want is to actually deliver good code. You want to be able to ship good quality code. Like no one wants to ship bad code. Like no one does that intentionally. But there's lots of pressures and tensions on developers to build stuff faster, or they give an estimate for, I think I can do this in 5 days, and their manager says, or an executive says, oh, you have to do it in 2. And they're like, but I'm going to do it in 5 days. So it's like this, they're under a lot of tensions and pressures there as well. And one of the best things you can do is help manage the expectations, to be a bit of a buffer, to give them the space to actually help them focus on what they need to do. And a lot of that is by not telling them exactly what they need to do at every step, but showing them how you're thinking about what the priorities are, and then letting them participate in making those decisions. This is a caveat to this, is that you need to be working in teams with engineers that want to develop and want to do good work and want to build. If you're at a big corporate, or if the team is very detached, or the developers literally just rock up to write their code and then go home, and they don't really care about the quality of the code or what problem they're solving, you're always going to have issues, and then you're better off just micromanaging them and don't worry too much about the relationship. Just put in enough buffers for overruns, put in enough checkpoints, and manage it through that. It's very difficult to take somebody who's not passionate at all and actually build great working relationship with them if you are passionate about what you're doing. So that's the one caveat. But if you are both passionate about it, by bringing them in, not offloading your work onto them, but bringing them in, saying, this is how I broke the task down. This is what I think is meaningful bite-sized chunks. Would you agree? If we just ship these 3 things first, is that good enough to start with, and then we can come back to these other 3 later? So helping them see the compromises that you're making and giving them more visibility on how you're trying to make their lives easier, as well as providing more of a buffer, setting expectations, adjusting deadlines as needed, or communicating, sort of doing high-level cover for them. You're going to start building trust with them, and then they're going to start communicating and collaborating with you a lot closer. So that's the short answer to the 1-hour lecture on how to work with developers.
Okay, yes, I understand. I understand. I think building that trust is important because I'm fairly new to the team, so I understand. Thank you very much for your response.
Yeah, thank you, Justine. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Reja, for your short answer to a 1-hour question. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, yeah. So there is this question also from someone. I copied it already and pasted it on the chat. Would you like to read it?
Yeah, sure. Let me actually answer Precious's second question. Had a hard time integrating in a space of relating with a team for the first time when working on a project for the first time. How do you work through that? Precious, do you want to give a little bit more context on that, or do you want me to answer it in a very abstract way?
Precious, if you want to speak, please make it very brief. We want to make sure it's like touch the other question as well.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so in the sense, when I came into the project, it was, let's say, the project is somewhat new, and I haven't really known what the topic is. So it's just integrating in that sense of getting to know something new and trying to manage that new subject, trying to meet the team and working through that. I just want to get more clarity on how best to integrate in that state.
Cool. So I think the easiest way to get context is to work out what's most important. Like, what are we actually trying to achieve? Trying to create some hierarchy around that. So reading the project documents is one way to do it if there are documents or things around that. But also creating your own version of that. I often like to draw a project, draw my understanding of it, of how the bits fit together or what that works like, which is often by reading the documents, you can get a rough idea of that. And then you take that model and go and chat to the developers or chat to the designers, or the people on the team, saying, is this right? Where is my understanding of the project wrong? Sort of going to them to ask for help or ask for advice, or ask them to understand their context will help build a fair bit of rapport that'll create a connection with them. The other thing you want to try and do on a new project as quickly as possible is get some quick wins to make their life easy. So while you're chatting with them and while you're meeting the team members, ask what they're struggling with. Ask what is the most difficult thing about this project. What would help us ship faster, or what would help you? What would make you more comfortable in working with this project? Trying to identify some kind of risks or uncertainties that they have, and then go out and resolve that. If it's better documentation, spend your time writing that better documentation, or finding an alternative API for the one or the other, or connecting people saying, hey, you said you have this problem. I chatted to that person. They're actually solving that problem already. You should chat, and then that person's problem gets solved. But firstly, understanding their context and actually hearing and having empathy with how they fit into. So, step one is get context of the project. What's important? How do you get a mental model of what the project's about? Then empathizing with the different team members to understand what their understanding is and what their constraints or frustrations are, or what you can learn from them, or where your mental model is wrong. And then thirdly is try and find a pain point for a number of them. It can be super small things. It can be this documentation is in the wrong format, or this documentation is too long. Can you summarize? It's a 30-page PRD. I'm never going to read that. Say, great. These are the 3 pages that are most important for you. I've summarized them into bullet points here. There's a 1-page summary of the bits that you need to know. So quick link, just a list of links of hey, here's whenever you need an API, here's the link to the API, or here's these documentations, or find some way of adding value to them. as the third step. And if you can get those three right, you're going to get up to speed with the project. You're going to understand how the team fits together, the context of that, and you're going to build pretty good rapport and pretty good brownie points with the team relatively early by finding some quick wins.
Thank you very much.
Cool. So moving on to that other question, I have a question around product launches. Would you go with an approach where you push a product to market so you have early first market access, as opposed to the product being fully ready, or wait till the product is fully ready and risk not being first to push the new product, the new idea to market? In almost all cases, the full product that you're thinking of is not as important as shipping the one core feature that is most important. So let me actually pull up. Let me pull up a real example of how I've actually broken this down for one of my clients. So one startup we're working with, they've been working on it since about April. They are an API gateway. So let me just share my screen quickly. But they're an API gateway. What am I showing? Oh, I'm showing this whole thing. Okay. Can you see Miro? Cool. Okay. So this was a list. This was a full sitemap of all the pages and the features they were trying to build, and they had like from the website, the light yellow is the website. You go to an API list, you go to API service info. From there, you can view the keys. The orange is only when you're logged in, so you have to be logged in order to be able to see this. It's a public dashboard and what's logged in. So this dark yellow and the orange is one platform, and the light yellow is another platform. And kind of what I did was like, it's taking them months to try and build this, and they're building this end to end. So what I said is like, what is the absolute minimum we can ship that would add value to their customers? So, which became this purple minimum viable product. Go to home, be able to log in, from login, see my apps, create a new app, or view my keys. View my keys, and then add a service to an existing app. Those are the features. Like ship out reports, finances, activity logs, like API keys, all the public API dashboard info, live demo, all of that can come later. Let's build something that adds value to your customers right now. And so that's what we're building. After 4 or 5 months of wheel spinning, we're hoping we should get something live by the end of this week. Like I basically all these purple screens, because it's kind of mostly built. It's just they're trying to build SSO login and everything all at once, and they actually don't need all that. They literally just need one login. They can create the login for their clients. Let's build something useful for your current clients. Then let's look at new clients who land on the homepage who need to be able to find an API, see the code and implementation, view a live demo, and then get the API key. So then we'll add the blue dots to once we've shipped the purple, given it to customers, got real feedback, real users, we'll then add the blue dots. Then later, after that, we can then go and chat to our users and say, well, what do you want next? Do you want to be able to add and manage users? Do you want to be able to add and see your billing? Do you want to be able to have a live API status? Do you want the reports? Out of these 3 reports, which one is the most important for you? Let's ship that one report first. And so in doing that, like this entire, like some people would say, oh, but you've got to ship this entire product, and anything less than it isn't going to add value. And the short answer is that's just very, very rarely the case. Almost always, there are ways to trim down, looking at a different, like, so there, what I did was look at 2 different customer personas. There's existing customers and new customers. Let's look at the existing customers. What are the jobs to be done? What is the bare minimum, like what is the minimum thing we could add that is valuable to them? Being able to view and manage their keys that they can share with developers. Great. Let's ship that one feature. Let's get the developers, give them access, see how they use it, and then ask what's most important for them. So these are the next 5 things we can build. Which one do you want us to ship next week? And they're going to say, this one is the most important for us. Great, you ship that. And developers love that. Developers love using a product that is continually getting better and continually improving every time they log in. Like that builds really great rapport with customers. And so in almost every case, I would go for work out what is actually important. What is the one key feature, and ship that first. If you look at Twitter, started out as a group SMS platform. Like that's what they launched with. And then they realized that the SMSs was too expensive, so they moved to a web protocol, and it became just you could tweet and you could follow people, and that's all it was. And then they noticed their community was using hashtags and @ to tag people, and so then they built in that functionality, and then they built a video, and then they add the whole stuff. Facebook, same story. Like so many great products start by one killer feature and then expanding on that. I mean, Facebook started out as a yearbook for universities. Like that's what they were. You could find your friends and you could connect to them. Like one of the next features they actually launched was you could poke people. Like I don't know if any of you are old enough to actually have poked people on Facebook. I'm definitely in that camp. But yeah, that was where they started, and then they realized actually poking is not relevant, and being able to message each other is more important. And then they added messaging, and they added a whole bunch of other groups and marketplace and a whole bunch of things. But if you look at Facebook now, you're like, oh, that's everything. And when I used to run a dev shop, people would come to me and say, I want this, and I want messaging like WhatsApp, and I want this view like Pinterest, and I want that. And I'm like, great. Each of those apps you've described to me has spent about $1 billion building what they do. You give me $5 billion, I'll build you that stuff. Or you can give me a lot less money, I'll just ship this one feature that actually matters, and we can ship that in 3 to 6 weeks. Which one do you want? And so often by focusing, if you're trying to build everything, it means that you're not clear enough on the actual jobs to be done and the personas of the people you're solving the problem for. So by getting really explicit on that, you can normally prioritize pretty ruthlessly on what actually adds value to users. And if you're not clear on what that is, you definitely shouldn't be building anything. You should go out and talk to users and build some prototypes and test and learn and work your way through that before you get any further. So don't get caught in the bull trap. Like people don't ever need another feature. They want their core job to be done. They want the fundamental value to be delivered. And when you cut it back down to that, features and things start going out the window, and you very quickly realize like single sign-on is a nice to have. You don't need to have like Google and LinkedIn logins. Like just start with an email and a thing. And the benefit of launching with something that's a little bit clunky or has a little bit rough edges is you get really, really clear customer feedback. If it sucks or if the people don't get value from it, they're going to drop off really quickly. If it's often if it's slick, they might stick around for a bit or try and think it's useful, but it's not really useful, and you get very mixed signals. If it's a clunky app and people like keep coming back and keep using it, that's a sign that you're really onto something amazing. So if you're looking for fast feedback loops or if you're looking to build great products, shipping a small, even slightly hacky version or like scratchy version of what you're trying to do, that still fundamentally delivers the customer job. I'm not talking about shipping broken product. Talking about shipping product that isn't quite as polished as it could be, but solves the real problem. People will still use that. And so I would almost always recommend that you should cut it into smaller things and ship what you need to ship first. Get customer feedback, get them using it, get their feedback, and prioritize what they want next. And that's always going to build you a better product faster than trying to build what you think users want, ship it all, and then realize like no one's signing up and you've got 20 features and you don't really know why, and you're talking about all these features, but you're not really sure which one is the most important, or if you were to remove a feature, which one would you remove, or like it just becomes way too conflated, or you're trying to target too many customers with each version of the app, but you're not sure why it's not taking off because you don't have proper analytics in place. But by stripping it down and making that triangle really small, you can get really tight feedback. You can build really strong signals of what's working, what's not working, and you're far more likely to build great products. #rant over.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roger. Thank you for shedding light to a lot of questions that we asked today. I would have loved to take more questions if there's anyone actually. And just if there's anyone at all, and in case there is none, I'll just have to say that thank you so much for making our time to be on the call today, and also of course we look forward to doing so many of these with you.